Today we're going to go over our last lecture for Chapter 12 about the lymphatic system and body defenses. First we'll go over organ transplants and rejection. So there are several different types of grafts. An autograft is when tissue is transplanted from one site to another on the same person. So that's like if you had a blood vessel that was taken from your leg and used in a bypass surgery on your heart. So you're using your own tissue to repair something. An isograft is when you have a tissue graft from an identical person. So this is only possible if you have an identical twin. An allograft is tissue taken from an unrelated person. So this is what would happen like if you were an organ donor or donated a kidney to somebody who's unrelated to you. And then a xenograft is tissue taken from a different species. So occasionally there have been transplants that are experimental with like using a baboon heart or a pig heart to repair someone's heart. When you get a transplant, autografts and isografts are ideal donors because there's no chance of serious rejection. Xenografts are never successful, so they can be temporary, but they are not a permanent solution. And allografts are more successful the closer a tissue matches, and that's why there's like blood marrow transplants. You have to have donors screened before you can get a transplant because they need to be genetically similar enough that your body will reject the tissue less or not at all. And a lot of times people are still on immunosuppressant drugs when they get a transplant so that their body doesn't kick out the new organ or tissue. The immune system can also experience some disorders. So one of those is allergies or hypersensitivity. And it's when you have an abnormal, vigorous immune response. And there's different types of allergies. So there's immediate hypersensitivities, and these are triggered by the release of histamine from IgE binding to mast cells. And there's reactions that begin within seconds of contact to the allergen. So this is when you touch something and immediately you break out, or you eat something and immediately you go into anaphylaxis. So anaphylaxis or anaphylactic shock is a dangerous systemic response where the whole body reacts to an allergen immediately. Delayed hypersensitivities are a little different in that they're triggered by the release of lymphokines from activated helper T cells, and these symptoms usually appear 1 to 3 days after contact with the antigen. So next we'll go through kind of how someone experiences an allergic reaction. First, an antigen or an allergen invades a body, and these are things that don't cause disease, but because they're foreign, your immune system overreacts to them. Then plasma cells produce large amounts of class IgE antibodies against that allergen. And this allergen could be pollen, it could be dust mites, it could be tons of different things. Next, the IgE antibodies attach to mast cells in your body tissues. Then you're going to eventually probably experience this allergen again. So if more of the same allergen invades the body, allergen binding to IgE on mast cells triggers release of histamine, which is a chemical. The histamine has a few different effects on your body. So it can cause blood vessels to dilate. And that promotes edema. It can stimulate the release of large amounts of mucus. That's why people get runny noses when they have an allergic reaction sometimes. And it can cause smooth muscle to contract, which can be a problem if this happens in your airway and constricts the bronchioles. Another problem that can occur with your immune system is something that's called an immunodeficiency. So it's when the production or function of immune cells or complement is abnormal. This can be congenital or it can be acquired due to disease. And this does include AIDS, which is acquired immune deficiency syndrome. Autoimmune diseases also happen. This is when the immune system does not distinguish between self and non-self, so the body can produce antibodies that are sensitized to T lymphocytes, and you can end up attacking your own tissues. Autoimmune diseases include things like multiple sclerosis, where brain and spinal cord tissue is destroyed, myasthenia gravis, which is when you have impaired communication between nerves and skeletal muscles, and type 1 diabetes mellitus, which is when it destroys pancreatic beta cells, and those are the insulin-producing cells, which is why it leads to diabetes. You can also get rheumatoid arthritis, and that's when your immune system destroys your joints, or lupus, which can affect kidneys, heart, lungs, and skin. Or glomerulonephritis, which impairs renal function by damaging your kidneys.